You guys are in like at least in the front block. You know.
I would change it.
Okay.
Again, I'm sorry.
I'm on. Check.
I thought this was free.
No, nothing's free.
So we have to write you a check.
Check. There we go. Could I have the check, please? While we're just playing with technology, we could do some starting up stuff. Can I just introduce myself? Somebody,
Bill Parker from Camrose.
perfect.
Sure.
I studied my bio, so I have it memorized so I can introduce myself.
So, but you have a name tag, so you should be okay.
I'm 52 next month if I live till November, and
And your name is Bill Parker?
and as a consequence of early dementia, I have that on there all the time. I look in the mirror and at least I can read my name backwards. Well, I'll tell you. I'm just going to give you a 30-second bio of me and then a little longer bio of hospice. I don't want to keep looking over my shoulder. If it looks like there's something up there that has to do with me, just nod and then I'll know. Okay, good. So I grew up in Westlock, Alberta. I was born a very small person at a young age. And from Westlock, I went to Camrose, where I went to the Canadian Lutheran Bible Institute, and then to Camrose Lutheran College. I was in its last graduating class called CLC in 1990. I did various and sundry wonderful things until I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to go to seminary. I went to seminary in Saskatoon and was ordained and worked in the Lutheran Church as a pastor off and on for 15 years, and had explored quite a lot of rooms within religious vocation and was content in my exploration and wanted to explore things beyond that. So I went and was trained as a compassion fatigue educator, which I did and continue to do. And then 2 years ago and a half, I was offered a position with hospice in grief and bereavement, and that expanded also to program development. So I enjoy long walks with my dog in the woods. I like to cook, read books that I consider good, and watch movies that make me laugh. I'm extraordinarily passionate about two things: holding people's stories and encouraging people to live authentically themselves, which means the broken parts and the blindingly beautiful parts. And I'm not sure I actually even differentiate between those two. So tonight, what I want to give you for consideration and to hear back from you how this looks and feels is an idea that our sorrowing is a part of our soul work. And so I am calling this, I can see it even if you can't. And I may even just hold this up for some prominent parts. The soul of sorrowing. And there's a couple of prominent authors that inform this work. One is Francis Weller out of California, who wrote a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. He will be Hospice's 2019 Fall Symposium speaker. I do recommend him to you. Another one is Robert Niemeyer out of the States, and a third American, Alan Wolfelt, who is maybe a more common name in Canada, along with many years of readings through my vocation. So I'm going to give you, yeah, that's similar to what I have on mine. I'm going to give you a quick overview of hospice, just so you have an idea where we're coming from in our history, just like the 5-minute version. And then I would invite you to an exploration of the soul of sorrowing. So are you able to even, without it being full screen, are you able to change slides? I don't care if it's full screen. Like, we all have, at least 30% of our vision, I'm sure. The 1966 model, of which I am, had very few wiring issues. And my mom and dad bought the extended warranty package, but it didn't have the rider for your eyes. And when I was about 44, you know how when you're 30 and you make fun of all the old guys at church that are doing this with their, and you think that's so doggone funny? And then you hit 45 and you notice you got to start holding stuff further away. Okay, that's good. A little bit weird, but good. So, I'm going to try this too, just for fun and see what happens. not a thing, but I can use this. So in 2010, in Camrose, Treva Olson and Beverly Drever had conversations about the idea of a hospice society and a hospice building for the whole Camrose area. And a hospice building is a place where people go to when they're actively dying. Palliative care does not mean you're dying. Palliative, soins palliatifs in French, means that you have something that limits your life that can't be cured. MS is a palliative condition. Cerebral palsy would be a palliative condition. Even diabetes could be considered that. Dementia is a palliative condition. You will die from that at some point, but you might live for 30 or 40 or 50 years in that palliative condition. Palliative conditions are treated to raise your quality of life. Pain symptoms, any symptom from the disease would sought to be limited or managed. But they're not trying to cure you because there is no known cure for whatever this is. Terminal cancer, for instance. But some people live with terminal cancer for many years. So when somebody gets that diagnosis of palliative, we think, oh my gosh, I'm dying. And that's not accurate at all medically. Actively dying means you're actively dying. And that's that last anywhere from a couple of months to a week of your life where your body is starting to do things to prepare for closure. So you can be palliative and not anywhere near death, and you can be dying and you will obviously then be palliative as well. So there's kind of two stages of palliative. There is life-limiting disease, let's manage symptoms, and then there's a very short period where spiritually, physically, emotionally, we are preparing for metamorphosis of sorts. So these two thought, we need a place where people who are actively dying have an alternative to the hospital or long-term care that's very home-like, where your dog or cat could come in, where our meals are made right there, and where it's quiet, and families can gather around and just be immersed in that amazing last weeks or month time. This absolutely stunningly beautiful woman right there is my wife, and she was involved early on in these processes. In 2011, they got their charitable status with the Canadian Revenue Agency as an Alberta society. So we are a charitable society. And if you could just move one ahead, it'll give us another thing. In 2012, a number of board members went down to the States and received training on how to train volunteers for hospice. And in that year, in the end of that year, they launched their first training of volunteers. I think there was maybe 12 or so. And again, please. In 2013, those volunteers were let loose into the community. And it was the very early roots of what we now have, which is a very robust volunteer program. And if you just keep going again, please. And again, I just do it a whole bunch of times because it's going to pop up a bunch of stuff. Somewhere in 2017, we had about 825 people that accessed our programs, Camrose and area. Just go back one if you don't mind. Oh my. That's okay. It'll pop up. I'll tell you what they say. Those 825 people accessed us 4,900 times. 390 of those were for grief care. And then another 335 accessed educational programs like this, and another 100 accessed palliative volunteers because somebody was actively dying. We had 9 programs running last year. And you'll see all that kind of information pop up in just a moment. And you can keep going. Thank you. And there'll be 3 things pop up on this one. Just go ahead and let them pop up. Our volunteers do 3 parts of palliative care. One is something called NAV care, which is where we go into somebody's home when they're really upstream of death. I mean, maybe like me even. But they've got a chronic illness, COPD, kidney disease, dementia, any number of things. And they and their spouse or family, they want some help to connect to resources. They don't begin to know who to talk to for Meals on Wheels, for a handy van, for somebody to clean their home, etc. Maybe socializing. So NAVCare volunteers go in and they do an assessment and they say, what would raise your quality of life right now? Let's find out how to get you connected to those things in the Bashaw community or the Forestburg community or wherever you are. Early palliative support means similar to NAVCare, but this person might go into your home just to have a cup of coffee to give you somebody to talk with that's not family or friends. It's not a therapist, but it's somebody who could just say, this is what I'm experiencing right now. I just need emotional support. And then end-of-life care might be at home, it might be in hospital, it might be long-term care center. We have lots of volunteers in Bethany, for instance, especially when a resident doesn't have any family. So if somebody at 88 years old, nobody visits them, and they're actively dying. And Bethany will phone and say, could you provide us with volunteers? And we'll do round-the-clock volunteers for a week. And that person, the volunteer might just sit quietly with them. They might visit if the person's responsive, play music, just be a presence. Next slide, please. And there'll be a couple things pop up. In our grief supports, and that's why I'm here this evening, I provide one-on-one consultation. So I have had about 150 people pop into the office to say, I'm just having a hard time understanding my sorrow. And I will create that space where they can share their story. And we'll look at that and talk about some of the things I'm going to get into shortly. Every Wednesday morning, year-round, 52 weeks a year, we have this grief support walking group. In the summer, it meets at our office in Camrose at Mirror Lake Center, and we walk around Mirror Lake. Not me personally, but we have a volunteer that facilitates. And then they go back to the office for a coffee, a reading, and it's a drop-in group of people who've had some loss, and they find this sense of community in this where they don't have to explain what it's like to grieve. It's deliciously received. In the winter, we meet at the Camrose Rec Center, second floor walking track, and they walk around the track for a half an hour and then go out in the foyer for coffee. Grief companions are volunteers that we have trained to just literally be a professional listener to somebody whose sorrow is hard for them. So the volunteers are matched up with a man or a woman, and they are with them for 3 months, and they get together maybe once a week or every couple of weeks for a coffee or a walk, just to say, I would just tell me again the story of your grief. What's happening in your life? Grief and Bereavement Workshop happens a couple times a year. We did one here in Bashaw last spring, and we'll probably do one again this spring. It's a one-day workshop for people who are experiencing a loss, or they want to be supportive to somebody experiencing a loss. There's no fee for that. We have 2 in Camrose coming up on October 22nd and November 30th. And they are open to the public, so you can go on our website and just register, no cost for that. There's actually no cost for any hospice programs. You can access anything we do without fees and as often as it's helpful for you. Something called the Men's Cooking Circle, which is for any man, any age, any loss. We get together once a week for 7 weeks. We make a menu. We have a chef and a cook and a dietitian and myself. And we teach these guys to cook amazing meals, which we do with them. And we laugh ourselves silly in the kitchen. And then we sit around the table to eat together. We start to unpack the sorrowing of men. And it's an incredibly rich experience. So we've run this, we're on our 3rd time round running this program. Grateful that Safeway Sobeys sponsored our food for this next year. And finally, Death Cafe, while not a support group, is an opportunity for people to have conversation, open, honest, non-judgmental conversation about all things death and dying. a place to say, I've wondered about this. Here's my thoughts on this. Because death is still a bit taboo in our culture. Next slide, please. And there'll be another 6 bullet points there. So our volunteers are in the community in a bunch of places. And what we're doing is trying to actually train volunteers in outlying areas. So we have a team of volunteers in Bashaw, a team in Killam, a team in Viking, and a great cadre of them also in Camrose. That then know the community, know the people there, and are trained to do all the things I just told you about, and to do them in these places in your community. So we haven't done that yet in Bashaw. We're looking at a training in Killam and Viking coming up, and Bashaw will be on our list as a southern point in our catchment area. Next, please. Eric Fromm said, to spare oneself from grief at all cost can be achieved only at the price of total detachment, which excludes the ability to experience happiness. And what I want to lay before you this evening is the possibility that our sorrowing is a gift to us. Quite often, my grief clients will say that this is happening to them. Why is this happening to me? He or she might say. And that's a common feeling for us, right? Why did such and such die? Why did I lose my job? Why did this happen to me? What, though, if we just change that slightly and say, why is this happening for me? And there's a radical shift in how we perceive our relationship to the experience if we say, maybe all of the feelings and emotions I've experienced in my life came to give me a message. They came for me. They didn't happen to me. When we do that perspective with sorrowing in particular, it transforms the experience. It doesn't make it less painful. And I will not paint a Hollywood version of sorrow or grief here. It is incredibly difficult. It will tear us to our core, but for a purpose. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to steal that other half of this from you. Since it doesn't work up there, I might as well have it work on the computer I'm dealing with. Thanks, love. Okay. Just with somebody next to you, if you don't like who you're sitting with, you can move. I want to give you 2 minutes of discussion, just in pairs, real quick. What does it mean to sorrow? There's no right or wrong, just your definition with whoever you speak with. 2 minutes. Check. What does it mean to sorrow? I'll just randomly point my finger at people, and you can ignore me or speak as you see fit. Somewhere up here first.
Oh, sure, you always pick on it. That's why we were sitting in the back.
Yeah, well, if you were a good Lutheran, you'd be at the back. But you United Church folk are all sitting here at the front. Well, then you're in the wrong pew. No, it's too late. It's too late now. Too late. What is sorrow in your perspective?
I'm not sure that I have any sorrow.
Okay. So maybe sometimes sorrow is a question mark. I'm not sure. I think that's a really good answer. Good start. Because we might not be certain. Is this sorrow? Do I know what sorrow is? Thank you.
Such an empty feeling.
An empty feeling. Yeah. Yeah. That describes what many people who are doing work with me would say.
Inner pain?
Inner pain. Yeah. Just spit them out, like the stuff that's come to mind. What we're doing is we're going to form a picture here of sorrowing.
But to some people, sorrow could mean losing their job, losing their home.
Not just a death. Yeah, sorrow is sorrow. There's a room we enter inside of us, and it is one of several quintessential human possibilities. So when we were created, to varying degrees, we were created with the capacity to experience joy, compassion, passion, beauty, creativity. And another one of those that we have the capacity to experience is sorrow. It's not a disease. It's not something wrong with us when we sorrow, any more than there would be something wrong with us when we experience joy. It's because we're Homo sapiens, because from a theological perspective, because of Genesis saying we were created in God's image. We have capacity as the creature we are for these things. Archaeological evidence, as far back as we find, shows that humans did death rituals. They understood, as far back as you go, whatever your personal timeline for humanity is, go to the beginning of it, you'll have found something that spoke to sorrowing. It's who we are. And so, the loss of a job, the loss of a spouse, the loss of a hope and a dream, the loss of personal safety and security, all draw us into this space of sorrowing where we have soul work to do. What else do you experience, or what does it mean for you to sorrow? A couple more thoughts.
We want the back of the room to speak.
I'll just point. People are shy here. You've never been in this space before. I understand. It's not familiar. Back, one of you four.
Sad.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, right? Maybe that would sum it up. How do you feel? Sad. Deep, deep sadness. What was that? Hurt? Yeah, just hurt. Yeah, literally. Yeah. That's right. Sorry for yourself. Yeah, we could make if we just got comfortable enough to shout stuff up, we could make a pretty big list. Next slide, please. I'll just describe it to you. I'm going to describe 3 words. The first is bereavement, just so we have some clarification of language. Bereavement is the state of having recently experienced a loss due to death. Colloquially, that's how we use the word. But it comes from Old English, berefein, meaning to rob or steal or be taken away from something. So we can be bereft of a dream, bereft of our vocation. In our culture, when people say bereaved, they will mostly mean that you have recently found out that somebody died. And it really represents that time period where you've just found that out. I am bereft now. I just got a phone call. Next slide, please. Grief, then, as separate from bereavement, is what happens on your inner world. It's your thoughts and your feelings here. When you get that news, Bill, are you sitting down? What's going on? Yeah, I just got to tell you, I just heard that Frank was killed in a car accident. I'll be awash with some form of grief inside as I begin that process of entering the room of sorrow. Next, please. The third word is mourning. And we use grief and mourning interchangeably, but on a technical level, grief is what happens inside, mourning is what happens out here that everybody can see. So rituals of mourning include things like journaling, crying, ceremonies, talking about the loss. It's how the rest of the world knows what we're doing in here. And it's very personal. Some people, years ago, people wore black or wore a black armband to show they were in grief. That was a way of showing their mourning. We do that less now. It's not terribly important to differentiate between the two, but I just want to give you some context. Next, please. Actually, just go 2 ahead if you don't mind. What was that? Oh, isn't that funny? It did some funny things up there. That's fun. Don't you like it when life just surprises you? So I want to go into signs and symptoms. And if you do manage to get past this one, just go a couple ahead. There are 3 things that are going to happen in us upon news of a loss. I have a friend who was just relieved of his vocation this week. And so that's significant for him. I don't know any of the reasons, I just know he has lost his livelihood. And when he got that news, however he received it, a number of responses from within him would occur as he entered the room of sorrow. First of all, there's physical changes. And a number, you can go past that one. And there'll be 3 bullet points on this one. So that we're going to be affected physically, behaviorally, and psychologically. And really our whole being. And you can go to the next one too, please. So those of us who have sorrowed, which is everybody here, whether we knew it or not, will have experienced some of these things. So let me preface it by saying, grief is utterly unique to each of us. There's 7.5 billion ways to grieve. Slightly more than that now, actually. 1 for every human. There are commonalities, and I'm going to share the commonalities with you. We're not all going to experience these things because our grief is so utterly our own. But you may have tiredness, feel overtired. There may be changes in your appetite. You might eat more or eat less. I had a woman come to me whose nephew had died. And she said, I get up in the middle of the night and I eat a whole bag of cookies. She said, is that bad? I said, no. I said, probably you need to listen to that. When do you feel most bereft? When do you feel that sorrow just well up? She says, when I wake up. I said, your body wants to comfort itself, so eat a bag of cookies if you need to. Just make sure that you're also eating good stuff in your diet. That phase will pass. I mean, if you're eating 5 bags a day, probably you need to tone that down. But be gentle with yourself. Don't judge yourself for your body reaching out for things naturally. And just balance it, in this case, by eating like something green in addition to a bag of cookies. You may have weight gain or loss of strength, headaches. Lots of people will experience headaches in their sorrow room. Shortness of breath. So there's something called broken heart syndrome. Check. Broken heart syndrome, written up in medical journals, where your heart rhythm literally changes as a consequence of a response to deep, deep sorrow. So much so it will mimic a heart attack. Pain down the arm, shortness of breath, pain here. When you get these things, you go right to the ER. I had a woman come in and talk with me, and she said, I was having a full-blown heart attack. She was maybe 40. Ripped into the hospital. They tested her up upside down, every inside out, nothing wrong with her heart. She said it was her mom or dad had just died. She had broken heart syndrome. It can also, in the extreme, cause a full-blown heart attack. So our physical heart is so strongly attached to the rest of our being, surrounded by nerve ganglia that are very similar to what's in our brain, that this poor piece of equipment can even falter from our sorrow. If you have any symptoms in your sorrowing, in your body that you don't understand, go check it out. Check with your doctor. But let him or her know that you're sorrowing. So they know that these symptoms could be related to that intense waves of emotion that come. Next slide, please. Emotionally and psychologically, we may have denial or anger, resentment, bitterness. We might get confused with time. We might feel hopeless, afraid, deep, deep sadness, and irritability. Because when our tank gets too low, we just don't have that capacity to respond to things that would normally not prickle us at all. Severe mood swings. So let's just talk about the brain for a minute. The brain experiences a significant loss as a trauma. And a functional MRI of the brain of somebody who's grieving shows that the hindbrain is hyperactive. And it's kind of doing this. What happened? What? All the time in the background. So you know when you get a virus or a malicious program, on your laptop and it's playing in the background and it just slows the whole thing right down? It's kind of like that. So studies suggest the average adult brain could be reduced in cognitive function by 30%. So here's your baseline before a loss. All of a sudden you're dropping way down here, which means you're going to have short-term memory loss. You're going to have just be fuzzy-headed, immensely tired cognitively without even doing anything. If you are an adolescent, which now stretches from 12 to 24, you could be 50% down in your baseline cognitive functioning. 50%. So when we have students that are experiencing a loss and we wonder why they're suffering at school, it's because they could have 50% less cognitive functioning ability. And this can be for a year. And it's very, very personal, so maybe not, but up to a year before you bob back up to your pre-loss baseline. So 8 months later after a death, and you're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I should be better by now. Remember my words. What's happening to your brain is natural, common, and it will balance itself back out in time. Be gentle with yourself. I've had people who are nurses and teachers and therapists come and talk with me in the first few months after a really significant loss. And they're afraid to go back to work. Like, how am I going to function? Well, make sure when you're not at work that you're giving your brain lots of rest. Don't expose yourself to stories of trauma. Literally take more naps than you ever would. On the weekends, do the things that rejuvenate you so that you have stored up that 70% of functioning you do have. Save that for work if that's what you need it for. And just know within a year or so, or less, these symptoms will alleviate. You're not going crazy. I've had so many people come in and say, Bill, I think I'm going crazy. It's like, no, it's just your brain's doing what it needs to. And your body. Withdrawal, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Isolation, a reassessment of friends and activities, really common for us in a significant loss. And that deep energy depletion, not just physical, but remember, this is soul work. And soul work always takes a lot from us because it's going to give a lot to us. Oh yeah, you can move on. I've been moving on, you haven't. Sorry about that. Probably a next one anyway. There we go. And go right to the next one. Spiritual symptoms. So, again, extremely personal, but not uncommon for us to be very angry at our understanding of God. Why did this happen to me? And why would a kind God let this happen, whatever it is? That deep confusion or searching for meaning and purpose in this. Next one, please. We have these behavioral symptoms where we might forget, search for the deceased, that slowed thinking, dreams of deceased. I've had lots of people say they met their loved one in the dream world. I say, well, what happened in that space? Mostly it was encouraging and positive. Lots of children will meet a deceased parent in the dream world. And then for them, it is utterly real. And maybe it is real. I don't know. A sense of the loved one's presence, wandering aimlessly, just lost on the inside, and consequently one's feet take you to places of confusion. Trying not to talk about the loss because you don't want others to feel uncomfortable. We'll get to that. And that need to retell the story of the loved one's death. So I had a client, a man whose wife died. They're in their 70s and they have two adult boys. And one day, this client phones me and says, the boys want to meet with you and me there too. I'm like, sure. And I'd been meeting with this fellow off and on for a while. So we all get in there. They're in their late 40s, these boys, professionals. They loved their dad a great deal, and they loved their mom. And they sit down. The first thing they say to their dad is, Dad, this isn't an intervention. I'm like, it is, but it's not for him. It's for you. So we talk about a lot of stuff for quite a long time. And I listen to their story, and they listen to their dad. And then they look at me kind of like to say, so how do we fix him? Okay, so here's the deal. He isn't broken. He is beautifully sorrowing. He's going to need to tell the story of your mom's death, of her last months, and of his deep, deep love, which is coming out in this sorrowing room. He's going to need to tell that story maybe 10,000 times. And they're like, mm-hmm. I said, your job is to listen to it and to hold it. That's all. 10,000 times. When he has done his metamorphosis work, and we'll get to that in a minute, the story will start to dissipate. It won't be the predominant story anymore. But until that time, whenever that is, he needs to recollect. So here's two words, very important. Remember and recollect. But with a hyphen. To re-member. To bring back into membership. And to re-collect. To collect to yourself. What happens in sorrowing is, it's like we're built out of little Lego bits. You know the little Lego oneers? If we were built out of those, when we have a loss, some of those go off of us. And they scatter about. We literally lose bits of ourselves. Sorrow carefully recollects those bits. Not all of them. Some of them we don't need anymore in metamorphosis. But it recollects a bunch and it puts them in new places and rebuilds us. So when we tell the story of our loss, sorrow is recollecting to us. In our recollection, it's recollecting bits. When we tell the story of our loss, we're bringing back into the membership of our own being the one we lost, or the experience of loss. It is in the telling of the story that we begin to realize a new sense of what creature we're becoming in this painful melting and undoing and regrowing. When we're afraid to tell the story again because we think people don't want to hear it, we need to reassure ourselves with these words I'm telling you. The most essential piece of the sorrowing room is to recollect and remember, to bring back into membership. I love to tell the story of my dad. He died a year ago in July, end of June, 91. And to tell somebody a story about my dad brings him back into membership with me. Recollects the little bits. It lets me regrow so I can learn, how do I be in the world now without Dad? That's an important question. How do I do that? If I don't have the bits brought back, it's very hard. Next slide, please. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at what this transformation is, because I want to present this radical idea that this isn't a disease. You will not get over sorrow. Do you get over joy? Like, is it something you have to get over? Do you get over beauty or passion or creativity? Do you get over compassion? No, these aren't diseases. They're quintessentially places where we experience the fullness of our humanity. So what we're going to look at is, what does that actually mean? Literally, when I feel so broken inside. When I wake up in the morning and I actually don't know how I can get out of bed. When I don't know how to take a deep breath anymore. I haven't had a deep breath right to the bottom and right up to the top of my lungs. I haven't done that for 6 months. I don't know what it means. How do we let metamorphosis happen to us? Next slide, please. Try it one more time, see what happens. There's a video clip there. No, just go back. I'll tell you a story. Oh, maybe you can't even go back. You can just stop there for a second. I'm going to show it to you on here. It's okay. It's all good. So, I don't know if you can see this. Can you, sort of? It's a monarch caterpillar. And they form a chrysalis as opposed to a cocoon. But either way, what happens is that the creature one day, for no reason it can discern, it starts doing this. See, it's crawling along. Life is good. Hang out with your friends, poop, eat leaves. And then, all of a sudden, it starts. It's like, I don't know what's happening to me. And that's the moment you find out about a loss. And sorrow cocoons you. It wraps around you. It holds you. It protects you. And it also frightens us. You think about this poor creature. If it had a voice, would it not say, "What the? Yeah, I didn't ask for this. I was happy eating leaves. Really. Look at that. How painful that must be." And once she is completely enveloped, she will melt. We know biologically, same DNA, but turns into goo in there. And that goo, that sludge at the bottom, starts to regrow. I'm going faster than she is. Oh, there's the finished one in this case. Now, there's two important things in this story of this caterpillar. The first is, if a little boy comes along, it's always a little boy in my story. I can't imagine little girls do that. And sees this hanging on a twig, they're going to go, "Ooh, what's in there?" And they crack it open to take a peek, and what happens? Pardon? It dies. You cannot break open the cocoon. The second thing, which you're seeing right now, is if in just the right time she does not emerge from that cocoon, or whatever that thing's called, chrysalis, if she does not emerge at the right time, she will suffocate and die. And the third piece, isn't that amazing? But the thing is, this isn't one of these Hollywood stories where, ooh, it's a butterfly, it's beautiful now. This is just simply a story of, it went in with 12 legs, eating leaves. And when it came out, it had 4 legs and wings, and it sucks nectar. Do you know, what does she want? More than anything in the world, what does that beautiful butterfly want? Pardon me? Yeah, she's not interested in learning to fly. She wants to go back into the cocoon, go back through and be what she knew. That's when we have a loss, we're not interested in all this theory about, entering the world new without my dad. I want to go back and have my dad popping popcorn in a cast iron fry pan on the stove. But it's one way through there. It's just one way, that cocoon. So here's what sorrow does. You have that loss. And I can just see in your faces, you have my compassion. And I think sorrow is so beautiful. We have that loss. Sorrow wraps around us. Now, it's a semi-permeable cocoon. Like my clients let me in. You might let your pastor or a friend or a family member in. But at the end of the day, you kick them out because it's your soul's work. In there, we melt. Everything that was normal is gone. The world is chaotic. And we feel lost inside there. Because why? We've turned into goo. Very, very gently. Sometimes it takes a decade. I've had several male clients that came and it was 10 years ago they had a loss. They're still in there, gently regrowing. Their being knows when it's time to come out the bottom and look around and go, "Ooh, gee, not yet." But one day, and we must emerge, or we die. We come out and we stand on the precipice, and we look at ourselves and we think, I have to learn how to fly. You only have two choices. To die perched there, or to spread those wings and see, I don't know what's going to happen. There's no manual. But how am I going to be willing, in other words, to be in the world without him, her, it, whatever? And if I am, how do I use the new gifts that sorrow gave me? Because I do have wings now and this long, sucky tube thing, so I won't starve to death. Next, oh no, this one. On the left is, that's what we inherited from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She didn't intend this, but the grief theorists took her ideas about the stages of dying and turned it into stages of grief. And it was nice and neat and tidy. You have a loss, you experience all this terrible stuff, you start experiencing better stuff, boop, you pop out the other side, you're healed, you're fixed, you've been cured of your grief. Turns out, though, not the way it works. Who'd have thought? This is actually how it works. You have a loss, you feel terrible for a really long time. One moment, you actually feel pretty good, you're way up here, and an hour and a half later, a grief tsunami hits you and you are dying. And you do this on your own time schedule, not according to somebody else's. Not like, Jeanette, it's been a year and a half since your brother died, it's time to get on with it. That's somebody trying to crack your cocoon open. Nobody, not your closest family, friends, or therapists, have the right to tell you the timeline for your grief. So this young guy, 24, came to me. When he was 14, his dad died. And he just got reconciled with his dad. His parents had split up and he was mad. And just the year before, he and his dad got back together. And they were getting tight. And his dad died from some natural causes. That cocoon wrapped around that poor young man. He had no idea what was happening. No one to mentor him, to give language to what was doing with the melting and the metamorphosis. And it closed around for 10 years. He comes to my office. He's angry. It's like, ooh, that's good. Because, anger is the energy of change. If we listen to what it's trying to teach us, it's saying it's time for a change. I said, this is good. We talked about the cocoon, and he said, oh my gosh, I didn't know. He said, it is time for me to come out of that. 10 years is a long time, but it was just the right amount of time. Can you imagine what people were saying to this poor guy? 10 years? Good grief. Get on with your life. Let me crack your cocoon open and see how your metamorphosis is doing. Next slide, please. Karen Martin and Sandra Elder created this grief theory called Pathways Through Grief, or just Pathways. And St. Mary's Hospital Grief Support Group uses this. I really like it. In essence, it just tells us that there's an interior world of work where we may protest against this loss and feel despair or detach from the world or the reality of the loss. And we desperately need to do this. And at the same time, or mixed in with this, we may begin investing ourselves into launching off that twig to spread our wings and exploring the world and be filled with the hope that maybe actually I'll learn to be in the world without him, her, or it. And another beautiful thing about this is you can go from right here to right here almost instantly because there's no rules. We move fluidly through this within the course of a day or a week or a month or years. But we do, as we go through metamorphosis, we do start to spend more time up here. This is your support network. And the little dinky ones at the bottom and the top, those are the ones where they're like, you should get on with life and you need to flick them off your shoulder or take them out of your reality because they don't get it. The really big figures are the ones who are walking beside you and have committed to say, I will listen to your story 10,000 times compassionately. Next slide, please. And there'll be one more piece you can bring up. Interestingly, there are predominantly two ways that we respond to a loss. The first way, just the first way that's up here, and it's not based on male or female. Research would say there's an equal number of male grievers that do this or female grievers, but it's the feeling or intuitive style. This griever sounds like this. They pick up the phone. Yeah, what? No way. And no. And immediately, just this wave of emotion hits. You sit down and you just start to cry. Intense feelings of emotion. Moving forward involves exploring and expressing all of the wild emotions that are going to flare through you. You'll want to vent your emotions. There'll be tears. And feelings will precede and dominate any thinking or doing. Mostly sadness, despair, and loss. And it can be really, really big. And everybody around you knows you're grieving. Because, I mean, even 6 months down the road or a year down the road, somebody will say, how are you doing, Bill? And if I'm one of these kind of grievers, I'll be like, there's just tears in my eyes right now. The first question they ask is, upon hearing the news, how do I feel about life now that this is not in the world, he, she, or it? Next slide, please. And then again, there'll be 2 chunks on this as well. The second is the thinking or doing style or instrumental style. And this is where you try to make sense of the loss. You think about this. Your feelings are limited or toned down. You still feel. It's just not your first access point in the room of sorrow. Grief is expressed in thinking and doing. You may be focused on problem solving and action, and being physical will precede and dominate feeling. It might look like this. What? No way. When? Huh. All right. Yeah, no, I'll talk to you later. Shoot. I've got to clean the house because we're going to have a house load of people here. He or she will just go like a tornado through the house. He might go to the shop and start splitting wood or doing some weird thing. Again, actually no difference between men and women statistically. Now, these aren't absolutes. They're just 2 ends of a pole, and we can be anywhere in between, because remember, there's 7.5 billion ways to grieve. So we could be anywhere on that spectrum, leaning towards thinking or leaning towards feeling. When it's a woman who's a thinking griever, people culturally think she's cold or strong. Oh, she went to the funeral, she didn't shed a single tear. Look how strong she was. And then later they'll say she still hasn't shed a tear, she's got issues. But they haven't noticed that she has been working the metamorphosis of her life through her cooking, cleaning, volunteering, letting that energy flow out through the doing. When you have a man who's a feeling griever, and he's at the funeral and he's just a mess, people will say, hey, God, he is not doing well. And a year later, when there's still tears in his eyes, people are really concerned for him. Because they don't understand it's okay to be a human being and to be a feeling griever, even a man. Next slide, please. So, and you can just hold it there. I'll just run through. There's a bunch of cultural myths. We think they're facts. But we learn a bunch of stuff from our family and friends. So just help me out. Think about a couple of things that you would say are culturally accepted about grief? For instance, what would we say about grieving men? Grieving men don't cry. Grieving men teach their sons don't cry. You can cry at your mother's funeral. Just a little bit. That's it. What else do we learn about grief? How long should it take? Yeah. It could. But culturally, we're likely to say after a year, like, you need some help. It used to be much more culturally acceptable for us to have things like a wake in our house. If we came from Ireland or from the Maritimes, we still might do that. But not here anymore. That would be weird. So we have certain cultural rules that we consider to be absolutes, but might be more myth-like. It is a myth that it's a disease. It is not. It is a myth that you're dysfunctional if you're grieving and you can't keep your thoughts straight. It is a myth that it's a result of human weakness that you show emotion, anger, sadness, frustration. It is not due to a lack of spirituality. That is a myth. The pain will not go away faster if you ignore it. C.S. Lewis, after his wife died, wrote, "You must lean into the pain." Because he was trying to lean away from it like so many do. And he realized metamorphosis will not happen if I lean away from it. How about, it's important to be strong? I agree. And strong might look like melting into a pile of goo. Do you know how much courage it takes to allow your being to come undone? The men and women that come into my office, young, old, children, and they just cry. And then they do this terrible thing. Breaks my heart. You know what they do? They're full of tears. What do they say to me? I'm sorry. As if there's some shame in this. And I say to them earnestly, your tears are sacred and they are telling me a story. Please share them with me. Let me find the courage to be in your pain. You don't have to find it. Let me find the courage to be in your pain. If you don't cry, you're not sorry for the loss. That's another myth. Right? Because what if you're a cognitive griever, a thinking griever? Tears won't be your first sign of mourning. Moving on with your life means forgetting the one you loved. True? It used to be considered an absolute. Therapists used to say it's time to let them go. It's like, yeah, closure. Let's have closure. Yeah, it turns out that's not really very helpful. I had somebody in last week. They missed their loved one so much. I said, well, where are they? Almost angry. Well, they died. So where are they? I don't know. I don't know if I believe in heaven. That's not what I'm asking. Where are they? They look at me blankly and I said, did they not naturally move here? Were they here when you first met them? Did they come into this space? Yeah. Were they in this space for your whole long life with them? Yeah. And where are they now? They put their hand there like, yeah. Don't forget them. Don't let them go. Hold them tight right there. Cherish them. Listen to them. Commune with them. Friends can help the mourner by not bringing up the subject of his or her loss. So I do this gig at Providence Place in Daysland for staff and residents. And there's this beautiful elder woman, about 176 years old. Her whole face was just this gorgeous three-dimensional roadmap of her life. And she says, Francine's husband died 2 weeks ago. They've been married longer than dirt's been on earth. And I haven't gone to see her. I don't want to go in and make her feel bad. Like, Like, she feels as bad as she'll ever feel. You cannot make her feel badder. There's nowhere to go. in her life that's worse. More likely is you don't know if you have the courage to enter her sorrowing room because you think you need to fix it. That's not true. What that sorrowing room does is invites the people in our lives to come in and sit down, cross-legged before our sorrow, and put their hands out. This is the posture. That's all. I'll just hold this cup of sorrow with you. I'll listen. You go knock on Francine's door. Don't say anything, just go in. Give her a hug if that's appropriate. And then just sit. It is a myth that we should not bring up the story. Ask them. If they don't need to tell the story again, they'll say, no, it's good. And you say, great. But ask and then close your mouth and put your hands out. A good way to express sympathy is to say, I know how you feel. Because I am you. I know I don't look like you, but I really am. I know every one of your feelings. You don't just bite your tongue till it bleeds when you want to say that. You could say, I don't know how you feel, because there's 7.5 billion ways to grieve. Would you be willing just to tell me about your grief on this day? Right? You can do that to somebody. You can find the courage in yourself to say, would you just tell me about your grief? They might say, I don't need to right now, and you go, that's good. I'm good with that. And they might just break down and cry, and you can say, tears are sacred to me. I'll gladly hold them with you. Do you want to just pop ahead about 14 slides? Yeah, you can go all the way through these myths. Just look really quick. So, stop there. Ken Doka, another American theorist, really brilliant man with grief. And he came up with this idea of disenfranchised grief. Grief experienced in connection with a loss that is not socially acknowledged, publicly shared, or supported through rituals, i.e., suicide, i.e., an animal companion dies, a stepchild dies, miscarriage, right? Things where, it's like we're just kind of awkward. It's like, well, it was a death, but it wasn't like a really close death, so it shouldn't bother you. How about a client at work dies? So these are disenfranchised griefs because our culture won't really give you a place to tell your story your 10,000 times. There won't be a ritual that you're invited to. So I had a young woman, family friend, whose horse died in a really awful, tragic accident. And this creature was very dear to her heart. And I said, do you want me to come out? Should we do some ritual? And she phoned me back and said, I want that. So she invited a couple of friends, and her mom and my wife and I went out. And there was this beautiful horse. It was covered. She'd clipped a piece of mane. And we did ritual. I said, tell a story. And she told some stories. I said, where in you did this love reside? And she talked about the closeness she had. All I did in that was say, this is legitimate sorrow. You have entered the room of sorrow. It is not less legitimate than if a human in your life had died. This is difficult, dangerous stuff because our culture will slam people down. How many women have had a miscarriage, didn't talk to anybody about it? Why? Because, you can always have another child, or you already have a baby, or it wasn't meant to be. There, that's helpful, right? No. So, when you can, re-enfranchise people's sorrowing. Don't ever compare it. You cannot compare her loss of her husband with his loss of his wife, with her loss of a horse, with his loss of a job, with their divorce. You can't compare them. It's just sorrow. And it's utterly unique. And I tell you, it's metamorphosis. and it's hard. Every time. Yeah, you can stay there. I'm just going to bounce ahead. Okay. If you would be so kind as to just shift around into groups of 3 for 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Groups of 3, that's hold 3 fingers up. That's how many people in a group. And discuss this. It's a hard question. I'm asking for some vulnerability. What bereavement or grief situations do you find most distressing to deal with? Not your own necessarily, I mean with somebody else. Somebody has just had a loss of some sort. For you, what are the most difficult situations to be in and to be present to? And we'll come back and just collect that. Because this tells us something about us as a people, the answer to this. What grief situations do you find most distressing to deal with? And just to the degree that you're willing to share with your little triad. There are experiences that we encounter that are, well, the Buddhists say you need to have a strong back and a soft front, or an open heart. So strong back, you need to have backbone in life. And at the same time, you need to have an open heart. And that entering somebody's sorrow needs that. We need courage to enter that space. I was just talking with these gals, and it reminded me that, quite often when you have a death, people treat you like a pariah, like they stop coming by. Mostly, it's not that they don't care. It's that it frightens us because we don't know what to say and we don't know what to do because we think we're supposed to say and do something. Because nobody ever taught us that actually all that's needed is this. It's all that's needed. But if you don't know that, and you think you're supposed to go in and fix it, good grief, that scares the liver out of us. What are some of the more distressing or difficult grief situations for us? Give me some examples. Yeah, but out loud. Suicide. Yeah, suicide can be really tricky for us. And it really genuinely is complicated. Yeah. And seeing the pain of the person that survived. That's right. So having the strength and that courage to say, I will be in the presence of your pain, can be really hard for us. Other examples? Loss of a child. Somebody's child dies. And it's just so wrong. Like it just goes against all of the natural laws. Others. I tell you the one that's on your mind and nobody's saying it or not conscious of it is, whatever death really hit us, like when your so-and-so died, a similar death to that is really going to be hard for us, right? And especially if it was in any way traumatic or unexpected, right? So if your cousin died in a car accident, as an example, meeting up with somebody who says, geez, my cousin just died, it's going to make you go, right? That's hard for us. It's distressing because it takes us back into our room of sorrow. I want to just kind of summarize things a little bit. I want to first acknowledge this is hard. It's hard to learn about. It's hard to talk about. I want to tell you that you really have my compassion for your sorrow this evening. Sorrow makes us have deep sighs. It makes us feel like we don't know if there's going to be sunshine inside us again. It scares us. What is our soul doing? Our soul says, our sorrowing soul says, if you will sit at my feet and be my apprentice, I will teach you how to unfold in new ways. Sorrowing says, it is not my intention to hurt you. I have not come here to undo you. I have come here to grow you, to deepen you, to ripen you. See, things happen in our world, for sure and certain. Everything dies that's alive. Everything, every human being on earth right now is going to be dead 120 years from now. The oldest living creature, maybe a tree or a bacteria or something on earth, will still die. Sorrowing says, I'm here to teach you how to navigate that because it is going to come. So, with fear and anxiety, trepidation, we kneel at the feet of sorrow, which is our own inner voice, our wisdom, maybe the spirit within us. And we kneel there and we say, I will be your apprentice, teach me. So when you are lost, utterly lost in your grief, remember these words. Sit down somewhere and quietly say to your sorrow, what do you need from me today? And listen. And it might say to you very gently, I need you to not get out of bed today. Just sleep. Stay in your pajamas. Be cocooned. It might say, I need you to eat chocolate quite a lot. And a little bit of good red wine. Careful. Just a little bit. It might say, go out into the woods and listen to the trees and the birds. It might say walk. It might say run. It might say get angry. Safely angry. But get angry and let the energy of change burble up in you. I promise you, from the road I've traversed myself, when we quietly still ourselves and say to sorrow, what do you need from me? It will answer us. And its answer will deeply guide us. When grief is fresh, a month, 2 months, 3 months in, and our world is nothing but chaos. It can be nothing but chaos. Expect nothing else. Somebody's going to die coming up here for all of us. That's life, right? Okay, the next time it happens, remember, for those first months, you have permission to be in chaos and expect nothing better. And still listen for that voice of sorrow. And sorrow will say, hold on. Find your center point, your anchor, whatever it is, and hold on with all your life because the waves are coming. And a few months will pass and the waves will be just a little bit less intense and a little bit less often, and they're still going to come. And you're going to say, sorrow, what do you need from me? And it's going to say, now start to breathe. Put a sticky note on your bathroom mirror so at least in the morning and at night it'll say take 3 full breaths and you'll remember to do that. If you feel like your metamorphosis is stuck, talk to a pastor, a therapist, a counselor, a friend. Go to a support group. Seek resources. Above all, there is this no timeline. Your grief is your own. Everything you are experiencing is happening for you. This is real, and it is beautiful, and it is human. And next, when you see somebody and their face is all screwed up in pain, just remind yourself, I'm not here to fix them. I just simply need to be with them. Wow. And if it's you and it's your pain, and you just need somebody to be with you, say to them, I don't need you to fix it. Just be with me for a few minutes. Well, it's that simple. Really, that's all. All of this talk, an hour of grief talk, it all just comes down to, it's just that simple. Just be with your own grief, and then be with each other's. Any questions? It's kind of a lot to digest. I haven't done anything, I think, in life that is just so utterly thrilling as sitting in a room of sorrow with somebody else's grief. That is just so sweet, the aroma of that intense pain and hope and lostness. Seeing Frank, after a year and a half, start to ease out of his cocoon and rejoicing in his courage to say, I'm going to try and be in the world without her. Ooh. Wow. Let's leave it at that. You may contact me. My contact info is in the brochure, the hospice brochure. You do not need to be referred to me if you wish to have time to explore the cocoon of your own sorrow. If you want to access any of our volunteers, get a hold of me and we can chat about that. You can sign up for our bereavement workshops, companioning, come to the Death Cafe, drop into the Grief Walk. It's all available to you. Those 2 cards, the postcards I gave you, are from the Canadian Virtual Hospice. And if you go online, these are just amazing. Yeah, does anybody not get these? Okay. And there's 2 different kinds here. I'll give you that one as well. Who else? So we are still working on getting land for a hospice building, but we do have an office space. What's that one say? Kids Grief? I'll give you this one too. Where we do our programming out of. And that is at what used to be called the Senior Center in Camrose. It's called the Mirror Lake Center now. In the lower level, we have our offices, which is where you would meet with me or meet our volunteer coordinator. The postcards give you access to an amazing array of online resources. I would first, though, say just go to camrosehospice.org. We really have a robust website for palliative care, grief care, whatever it is you've lost in your life, probably we have resources for it there. And you can do that in the privacy of your own home or on your phone or wherever you get the internet. Really appreciate you guys just sharing in this space with me tonight. There are some books at the back table from our library. Please don't take them home. But they're just some samples of what's available in terms of grief care. And you can certainly come to our library and just sign them out. It's at the Mirror Lake Center. And there's a ton of brochures we have that you can take home there as well at our office. Robin, I really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you for coming.
Greatly.
We really appreciate being here. If you're like me, when he said, do you have any questions, mine went blank. But we have coffee on, and there's cookies, and there's tea, and there's whatever you like back there. So if you want to maybe just stay for a bit and have some conversation, some questions might come
absolutely,
up.
yeah.
So please do feel free to stay, have a look at the books, and again, thanks for coming, Bill.
Appreciate it.
And do check out our website.
Thank you. Sometimes people sleep and don't ever feel rested, and sometimes they can't get to sleep. Hypersomnia or insomnia. And for you, it's insomnia.
Unless I'm very, very physically tired.
Have you talked to your doctor? And how long ago was your most recent loss? So, you may not sleeping well, because you're calm, and it is important to address that, even temporarily. So if you went to a he or she would have options for some sleep aids. Don't have to stay on for your whole